Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's guest is yet another very special guest. Let me tell you about him. He is a TEDx talk veteran, an international keynote speaker, and the celebrated author of Driving Demand, as well as its sequel, his latest book, The UnAmerican Dream. He's a 25-year experienced executive with a focus on individual and business transformation. He's the one, the only, Carlos Hidalgo. Hey, Carlos, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's the pleasure is all mine, but thanks for saying that. You know, let me dig a little further into your bio a bit and just tell the audience a little bit more in detail about who you are and where you've been. From January of 2001 through February of 2004, you were the marketing director for McAfee, the antivirus software company. 2005, you started this company called Annuitas, and you served as the CEO and principal through 2017, when you left and founded, I pronounce it correctly, I hope, VisumCx in 2017.
Yeah, VisumCx, absolutely. Yep.
Oh, good. I practiced that, actually, if you believe it or not. But you know, you do a couple other things too. You serve as an advisor to Workhorse Capital, and you're also a board member for Calibermind. Both of them are near to your home in Colorado there. Before we get into the conversation too much, though, I have to ask you, you worked for the McAfee company. How was that like? Did you actually work with John McAfee?
No, John was there. I came in after John left. So I was there, had a great experience, learned a lot, but John was there, but the stories were legend.
Yeah, you know, that might have been a whole nother episode on the podcast if you had actually worked with him. Well, quick question about him, though. Do you think that he is the guy behind Bitcoin?
You know, that is a great question. I know there's a lot of rumors out there like that. Would it surprise me? Absolutely not. I think the guy is I don't even venture to try to imagine how his mind works. It wouldn't surprise me at all, but I'm not going to venture a guess as to a yes or no. How's that?
And you said that I looked political.
I'll just answer politically.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah, he's quite a, let's say colorful character. Okay, well, let me just ask you one more question about your time at McAfee then. And I'm hoping you're going to tell me no to this one. Carlos, did you invent the pop-up?
I did not invent the pop-up. That had to come from some agency. And while it can be effective, and I have one on my site for the UnAmerican Dream, what I believe you have to do is make it so that it is not continually interrupting the user. So it has definitely been abused over time.
Yeah. I was going to lay blame to you for that. It's kind of like, and I'm dealing with it actually currently. Yesterday I had some malware or something that kept popping up and, you know, surprising me. But good, we will let you slide then. There's no execution today because of your involvement with the pop-up. We are going to talk about your books a little bit and your current position and current status. But I want to set it up. You know, a lot of our audience are professional salespeople, and you, sir, were a terrific corporate leader. And I mean were without saying that you're not now. I'm not trying to say that, but what I'm saying is you have a pretty glorified track record in the corporate business that a lot of the listeners would aspire to. So let me just kind of read this a little bit. Now, from 2009 until 2014, you were named each year to the 50 most influential in sales lead management by the Sales Lead Management Association. In 2013, named Who's Who in Lead Generation by B2B Magazine, which is now Ad Age. In 2015, Analytica named you most influential in B2B marketing. In 2015 and 2016, two-time award receiver. The company Annuitas was ranked high on the list of fastest growing private companies by Inc. 5000. Also in 2015 and 2016, you were named to the 40 most inspiring leaders in B2B and B2C C-level management by the Sales Lead Management Association. And in 2017, Flip My Funnel honored your book, Driving Demand, as one of the top 20 B2B books to level up your game in 2017. You are the man. You are like the dog. You are like the hero. You're a 2 times celebrated author. And I want to take just a pause, like a rest stop, and I want to ask you a question. I read one of your articles, some great articles, great content across the interwebs. One of them in particular, you said, you titled it, "No, I do not want to see your demo." Mm. No, I do not want to see your demo. Carlos, we have a lot of wholesalers, financial advisors. They don't want to see the they don't want to see the wholesaler's demo, the fact sheet, a cold email. In fact, I'll just read this to you. You wrote some great content. Disrupting buyers with offers of demonstrations, gimmicks, or a quick checking in to schedule a time for a call is not at all buyer-centric. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think we are in an age where, as a buyer, no matter what we're buying, right? Unless it's transactional, like dish soap or something like that, but we want to be educated. We want to know what we're spending our money on. We want to know what's it going to mean to us? How is it going to help us address the needs that we have? And I go further into dissecting problems versus needs. So when I think of the world of finance, I actually just had breakfast with my financial guy a couple of days ago. And Dave and I have known each other. He's known me since I was a kid at 12 years old. So I have unbelievable trust in him. But one of the things that I appreciate about Dave is he explains to me where my investments are going, what the risk factors are, what they're investing in, what does that mean? I'm not a financial expert. I do marketing and sales for a living, and now I'm into this whole kind of, if you want to call it corporate health perspective. Dave's the financial expert. And Dave could come in and be like, we're going to do this, 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 and this. But what I want to know is, Dave, educate me, help make me somewhat of just get me to novice level on understanding finance and investing and tax implications and retirement planning. If Dave just came in with a fact sheet and said, here's what all these funds mean, I'm reading this going, I have no idea what this means. The prospectus means nothing to me because that's just not my world. And so I believe as salespeople, as advisors, if we, as marketers, if we can help people understand and answer their questions and help them know how it's going to address the need, we have the opportunity to win much more than we're going to lose.
That's interesting. Appreciate you sharing that with us. You know, you mentioned a side note that if you want to help your salespeople adapt to the new world of a very sophisticated buyer, like the one you just described, send them to marketing events. And I'm assuming you don't mean like make them stand at a booth and sell their wares. What do you think the value that they're going to get from a marketing event would be?
Well, the ones that I'm able to participate in really talk about how buyers have changed. And the single biggest thing that has changed consumers is this little thing here. Because all I have to do is get on that, and it doesn't matter where I am, I can find anything I want. But at marketing events, I think what salespeople are going to learn is, what does that new buyer look like, whether they're a consumer or a business-to-business buyer, how to engage with them, and really how to transform themselves into a subject matter expert, and not necessarily just be there to try to close the deal, but literally walk their consumers or their soon-to-be customers through all the different stages of their buying process.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, is the buyer's process. And a lot of times wholesalers, even some financial advisors, they're more into the seller's process, trying to fit you into my funnel and to put enough, you know, food at the top of the funnel to get a little product out of the back of it. I think that's very wise. You know, your book, Driving Demand, brave book, great book. If anyone wants to pick it up, it's on Amazon, and I encourage you to do that. So I read off the litany of your successes. I read off the scroll of accolades, but then something happened. Lightning struck you, metaphorically, of course. At least I hope so. And you mentioned you didn't do a 90-degree turn. You almost did a 180-degree turn in life. Carlos, you mentioned some words like hitting rock bottom. And I want to ask you about that. Now, I joked a moment ago, and I said that the UnAmerican Dream is the sequel to Driving Demand. It's not the sequel. It's the antithesis. Antithesis? It's the opposite direction, frankly, as Driving Demand was taking us. What happened? You hit rock bottom. How was that? And as you're talking about that, feel free to share any warning signs you might have seen or things that led to that rock bottom.
Yeah, it wasn't like I woke up one morning and was like, oh, I've gotten very far away from who I wanted to become. It was a slow burn. And that rock bottom was the point where I almost lost. I was literally at the edge of losing my family, getting a divorce, being estranged from my children, who are all pretty much adults. My youngest is 17, because I had neglected them for years for the sake of growing a business. And I literally had to come to a decision. I was going to either continue to pursue professional achievement or take a step back and invest and cultivate in what I call, and I'm stealing the term from Brene Brown, wholehearted living. And at that point, it wasn't a difficult choice. And so I left the agency that I had started with literally no backup plan, had no idea what I was going to do next. But that was the first step in many steps. And it was a hard, dark, at times very lonely period, and really a time in my life where I had to deconstruct everything I had built about me and get back to my true self so that I could start again and down this new path that we're on with VisumCx.
Your TED Talk was interesting, and well done. You had the entire audience, both that were there and that watch it, on the edge of their seat. And I don't think anybody could watch it with a dry eye. And the point that you made that really hit home, not only with me, but I'm sure with all of the audience here, was the question, Daddy, are you in an airplane? Can you tell us about that scenario? And is Luke 17 now?
Yeah, Luke is 17 now. Great kid. Yeah, he's my youngest. He's my mini-me. Yeah, so I was at that point, I was at BMC Software. And I called home. It was, as I said in the TED Talk, I actually write about the story in the book as well, where for me, it was a short trip because we were in Dallas at the time. I was just in Austin, and got into my hotel, called home, and Luke answered. He was 3 at the time. And when he asked, Daddy, are you in an airplane? I kind of chuckled and said, no, buddy, I'm in a hotel. And he responded, you're always in hotels. And he hung up the phone. And he was really just saying everything that the family felt was, we are sick and tired of you being gone all the time. And my wife, Suzanne, called back, or I called her, I can't exactly remember, and she apologized. And as I said in the talk, I was the one who needed to apologize, because I was literally, not fulfilling my promise and my duty as a dad and as a husband. And so that was the first time where I said, I've got to take a step back. And shortly thereafter, I left BMC Software to start my first agency, and of course repeated, and even more so, the mistakes of the past. But yeah, that was it is still, and you could see in the TED Talk, it was hard for me to talk about, to see his little, going back, seeing his beautiful 3-year-old face, and there on the slide, and having to tell that story. But it's still it still evokes emotion in me when I think about it.
And I have 4 children of my own, and as I've learned, as I've raised them and are raising them with my wife, a lot of times the kids, especially when they're in a tender young age, they don't have very many original ideas. So is it possible that Luke was demonstrating what he was seeing that maybe you weren't seeing? Maybe your wife was saying those things and he was, have you ever thought about that? Do you think it's possible that he was just acting out what he had seen?
I will say it was it was something that the kids all, I mean, there were times when I was especially at BMC, I remember there was one quarter I was home 2 weeks. And Suzanne and I would talk about it, and she would say, understand how I'm saying this, but it's almost easier when you don't come home because the kids get so excited. You basically do your wash, throw your stuff in a suitcase, and then take off again. And she's left to pick up the emotional baggage. And so Luke was 3, my oldest was 9. We had 4 children in about a 6.5 year period. But I can also say at the same time, Suzanne was always so supportive. I know for a fact there was never, any kind of, gee, if your father was home, we knew that, and because right previous to that, when she was pregnant with Luke, I was unemployed. And you want to talk about scary. You've got 3 kids, 1 on the way, and you have no job. So we were so thankful that I did have a job. But I think regardless of what Luke was feeling at that point, I think what he was just summarizing was, especially the feeling of him and his siblings, was, when you're 3 years old, when you're 9 years old, when you're 17 years old, you don't care what your dad does. You just want your dad's presence, time, and availability. And that's what's most important.
That's interesting. And I appreciate that opinion. I'm just reflecting. I think now my youngest 2, they're 13 and 14 years old now, my Irish twins. And now they're at a place to where what daddy does is actually important to them. They are in this, call it, developing their social status with their peers. And unfortunately, America is wired this way to where if your daddy's a doctor, your daddy's a police officer, he's cool. If he's a doctor, you're a rich kid. So the idea of being there for them, I don't know if it's a binary thing. I think that they do want to be proud of what their daddy does, and they want him to always be there when they need him. How do you balance both? And I'm really asking you this on behalf of all of the territory sales guys that pack it up every week and basically try to get home as soon as they can for the weekend.
Yeah. So I would say pack it up as soon as you can and get home for the weekend, first and foremost. The whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses, you had mentioned social status, that is so self-inflicted. I was, as a matter of fact, I talk about in the book, one of my mentors through life. I'm actually up here with him and his family, with my family. Keith Vanderweel one time told me, I don't think God cares what you do. I think he cares more about how you do it. And I couldn't agree with that more. And I would rather see somebody really invested in working hard. And I don't care what it is, what you're doing. But I think the best example we can send for our kids is when I'm working hard, and I still work hard. And I do believe that's an example we can set for our children and those that we mentor, is there's value in nobility and hard work. But when we shut it off, we should shut it off. And we should be wholly present with our families, with our relationships, cultivating those, investing those. And I know for me, it was be around for the big events. The thing I regret the most is missing family dinners, missing time in the living room with my kids when they were young and wrestling and laughing and just being goofy with little kids like they like to be, because that is where the time happens. And that is where the bonding happens. I don't bond with my kid when I'm sitting in the stands and they're on the ball field, they're in a gymnastics meet. They like that I'm there, but that's not quality time. And so I really believe if we can establish our boundaries to guard our work, because we should be giving the best of ourselves to our work, but when we're done with our work, have another boundary that allows us to give the best of ourselves to our relationships.
I want to go deep on work-life boundaries in just a second. But you mentioned, protecting, getting home early, being present, and I sent you an email, a confirmation email yesterday about this meeting, and I got an autoresponder back, an out-of-office autoresponder that said, basically, deuces, I'm on vacation from July 3rd until July 15th. Don't talk to me. I'm not going to answer email. And literally, I thought, well, I broke a little sweat actually up here. I thought that maybe I had misconnected or something like this. But then here you are. and we can be sociable, but basically this is to kind of promote your book and to educate folks on what you're doing. How do you reconcile that with the statement you just made about kind of disconnecting and being there?
That is a great question. So you and I were introduced, I think we started communicating back in May, and I knew we were going to have this time. And so when you threw out the calendar, it was like, well, that date doesn't work. That date doesn't work. And so, but before I committed to this, my wife and I had a discussion. And I said, look, we're going to be up in the Adirondacks, and there's an opportunity to be on the podcast, talk about the book. It's going to be the last day of vacation. And what do we think from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m.? And we had a discussion about it. And so we said, you know what? Yeah, we can make that work. And most of the morning, just about every morning we've had has been really slow, and just kind of chilling by the river with some coffee. And so we said, you know what? This is an opportunity to promote the book, to get the message out, which is we're both really passionate about. We will move that boundary. But I can tell you this, when this podcast is done, that autoresponder is going to stay on until Monday, and I don't look at my phone. I'm not worried about email, and I have completely unplugged and disconnected. And the crazy thing about it is the world is still spinning on its axis.
You know, it's interesting. I noticed that your wife's maiden name is Justice. So well done, because we all know that justice will be served.
Absolutely. Actually, another fact on that, yes, Justice, but her dad was an FBI agent. Yeah, so there you go.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure that she's been, that'd be a great name, Officer Justice. Gotta like that one. Yeah. You know, let me ask you this question too, and this is kind of alluding to your book, The Un-American Dream. Carlos, what happened to the American Dream, the one that John Truslow Adams wrote about? What happened?
I think a lot of things happen. First and foremost, I think we have made it a materialistic only endeavor. And when we do that, and if you've ever, and I've had the opportunity, and that's you know how we came to be as a mutual friend, I've had the opportunity to travel to a developing world, and where they don't have the material things that we do, when we don't have near the wealth that we do in this country. But I think we've made it the American dream a materialistic, basically pursuit of money. And Truslow Adams is very clear in his definition to say it's not about only, I think one of the lines is, it's not about the number of motor cars. And when we boil it down to, I've got to achieve, I've got to wealth, and then on top of that, you have this new message of the hustle from guys like Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and Jack Ma, and the list goes on, about working your fingers to the bone. So if it is all about money, and the only way I can get there is working my fingers to the bone, I can't manufacture time. So when do I actually get to enjoy the money that I've made? So the whole thing is so perverse. And what we have to understand is, for us to achieve our American dream, it's a choice, and it starts with happiness. And I can choose to be happy, or I can choose to be miserable. And I know plenty of rich people who are really miserable.
Yeah, misery does not care about your bank balance whatsoever. You know, you mentioned the idea of finding your true purpose or your note. Can you explain that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, I think we are all here to, and I stole or borrowed and referenced what Kelly Flanagan talks about in his book Lovable, and one of my favorite books of all time. And he talks about, we are here to play our one note. And I know for me, I fell into the trap of, I'm here to do a lot of different things, and I can do this and I can do this. Well, again, we can't manufacture time. And so part of what I did is went back and said, what is the thing that brings me the most joy when I'm actually doing it? And so for me, that one note was helping people. I love to help people. It's one of the reasons we wrote the book, is to help people avoid some of the mistakes and some of the, cut their journey much shorter than mine. And to me, when we identify that one thing that we love, that we're good at, that we're passionate about, I can go play the living heck out of that note whether I'm working, in my relationships, if I'm in my community. And then you start to really see how much joy you're getting out of your life because you're so focused on playing that one note and playing it really, really well versus trying to lead an orchestra.
You know, that's well said. Now, it's been called work-life balance. I hear now work-life blend. Some of the people that were responding to one of your posts called it work-life harmony. Um, and and then I think you've kind of put the flag in the sand of work-life boundaries. And you mentioned a few what I call big shots. You know, Jack Ma saying that you should work 9 to 9, 6 days a week. And then my bro, Grant Cardone, right? He talks about you don't want to work a 9 to 5, you want to work a 95 hours each week. Now, we understand your position is that is not healthy, not productive, and really that's maybe a false god to worship, if I might use that analogy. But I'll offer you this point of view. I know that Grant and his wife Elena are on the same page, and they travel the world together, working together. They have their own identities, but they are both that kind of two-cylinder piston-driven engine, as opposed to someone that maybe is a one-cylinder engine and then he has this other thing to drive over here. And Carlos, I'll even offer this for your consideration. Our bro, Larry Goff, who is near and dear to my heart, in fact, gave me this as a trophy one year. It's kind of it has some duality. One is that I was a champion for the company, and the other one is that, man, I spent a lot of nights in the Marriott, got a lifetime premium membership or platinum membership. Thanks, Larry. But even our good friend Larry Goff told us as we were sitting around the table when he was our leader at a company, he told us the stories, Carlos, of taking his wife and kids on the road with him and staying at the Ritz-Carlton, and how his kids, his girls were taught manners at the Ritz-Carlton. And then that was an education that they were not going to get at, you know, the Tyler Elementary School that's there. So is it possible that Grant and Elena and their family are actually not doing a 9 to 5? They're just living their life. And there is no blending of work and play. It's just living. What's your opinion on that stance?
I think it is possible. And I'm not here to, excuse me, I'm not here to, if that's the case, if Grant and his wife and his kids are all saying, that's what we want to do, God bless them. But what Grant is saying to the masses is not that. What Grant is saying, go work 95 hours a week. That's insane. It's toxic and it's unhealthy. Now, if Grant went out and said, look, if you want to get what I get, I did 95 hours a week and my wife was with me and my kids are signed up for this. And this is what we as a family unit, we constantly check in with each other and we agree to. But if anybody changes that, if that one cylinder says I'm out, we're going to change course. I would be his biggest champion. I don't hear that. I hear 95 hours a week. Well, at that point, there's only 168 hours in a week. Where do you practice your own health, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, your relational health? Where Larry's concerned, Larry figured out a way to go out and do what he was doing, but make his family a part of it and stick around with them. And what Larry was doing was saying, it's my job to teach my kids manners. So I'm going to bring them with me so we can do that together. And then side note, Larry's never given me a watch.
Well, you're still young, Carlos. Keep striving for greatness. You know, I do want to give one more comment or nod to Grant, because I believe that he did find the right partner. And if his partner, if Elena was not okay with it, then he could not work 95 hours. And I don't know what they call it, work-life balance. I've heard it called the whole person concept. One of my mentors and my primary mentor, really, Dr. John Rhodes. I don't know if you know Dr. John Rhodes. He's a delightful man. I would like to introduce you to him, very much so. There's another backstory behind that with Larry Goff. That is in Larry Goff's bedroom, by the way. So we'll talk about that another time. However, Rhodes has a thing called your life score. What is your life score? And there's not silos to it. The wheel doesn't roll if you have a big crevice because your marriage is suffering, or because your children are fatherless. And it's a great point to make. So just to clarify, 95 doesn't work if you're isolated and alone. You have to have that balance, that whole person mentality. And I really appreciate, that concept. I can remember clearly, and Larry sent me there to the Bahamas. Great place. There's the Atlantis Hotel that's there. If you haven't been there, it's definitely worth the bucket list to go to. But I can remember bawling my eyes out. Me, the big tough guy, bawling my eyes out because I'm reading a book that talks about what I'm missing. It's called The Way of the Road Warrior. It's over there on my bookshelf. And it kind of made me feel the pain that it doesn't matter where you are. It matters who you're with. Would you agree with that sentiment?
I agree with that 100%. I think fundamentally as human beings, we're wired for relationship. We are not wired for work. We are not wired for our devices or anything else. We're wired for relationship. And when I know for my own self, when I was isolated, whether physically or emotionally or mentally, that's when I was my worst self. I think that's where the voice of shame, which is something that is 7 billion plus, we all have in common. Shame never goes away. That's where shame roars the loudest in our heads when we lose a deal or we lose a client or a big account. And that voice of shame is telling us how awful we are. And we tie our identity to our profession. And so I think, now where I am in business, again, I still work really hard, but my wife, Suzanne, and I are business partners. We are aligned. We talk about what we're going to do as a business. We talk about where I'm going to travel, when she's going to be able to come with me. Can we bring our children? Last year, I had to go to Australia. We were able to bring one of our kids with us, our daughter, for her birthday. So she traveled to New Zealand and Australia. So it's such a different thing. And again, it's not this, well, I'm not going to work anymore. I'm just going to mail it in or necessarily get home early. There's days I do work late, but those are discussions. And to your point, I love that cylinder analogy. It's not just my cylinder, because if I'm doing that in isolation and not including my significant relationships in there, it's no longer a sacrifice on my part. I'm just really selfish.
How does social media have a play in this? And because 14 years ago, there was no social media. It was 2005. The coolest thing was a flip phone. I still had a pager because I was so important. At least I thought I was, right? So social media allows us to stay connected. However, you and your wife mentioned that you only show the good times typically. You have these Facebook Lives. In fact, I even joke, Carlos, that I look much better online than I do in real person, right? Can't social media make up for a little bit of that distance and kind of help to write the engines to work together? Or is that a real bad joke?
No, I don't think it does, because I can't, if you and I were sitting here at the table that you can't see in front of me, we could sit here for hours and talk about our connection to Larry, things we have in common, our mutual interests. We could get really deep on what are we struggling with. I think social media is a great way to keep people up to date. I don't think it's a great way to stay connected. And again, because relationship is investment and cultivation in a person. It is being there, it is watching body language. And to me, the evidence of that is in this country, we are socially, what I call social loneliness. And we have never been more, quote unquote, connected on social media. But reports are starting to come out that say that loneliness in America is at an all-time high. And we have substituted being online for relationship, which is a dangerous, dangerous thing. Because again, that to me breeds isolation, because I can post whatever I want on Facebook and be totally alone, but still tell people how great my life is.
Well, Carlos, what about the phrase that distance makes the heart grow fonder, or quality time over quantity time?
Yeah, so distance does make the heart grow fonder. When I travel and Suzanne's not with me, I cannot wait to get home. But emotional distance does not make the heart grow fonder. Emotional distance actually kills a relationship. In terms of quality over quantity, again, I bring up my dear friend and mentor Keith, who one time said to me when we first had our first child, he said he's been asked, and Keith has 4 amazing kids. He has 18, I think, grandchildren. And Keith was once asked, do you prefer quality over quantity? And his response was, I will take quantity every time because it's in the quantity that the quality happens. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that is brilliant. In fact, as I ponder that, it makes me feel like, the quality is kind of subjective and quantity isn't. And I did a paper in college that talked about the criminal tendencies. And the number one factor that prevented kids from criminal act was the quantity of time with their parents, especially on the weekends. That was the number one indicator, was just having that connectivity, knowing that mom and dad were there watching, kept the kids from experimenting and straying. So that's I echo what Keith is saying there. Let's talk about a couple of things that you brought up that are also very relevant. This idea of hustle, this idea of hard work. I think that there's some confusion that's out there. Can you explain, in your words, in your opinion, what is the difference between hard work and hustle?
Yeah, I think first of all, hard work is noble and hustle is toxic. I For me, I was modeled hard work by my father, who's an immigrant, came here literally with virtually next to nothing from Cuba. I have seen my wife and the work that she does each and every day with our kids as they grew up and even now. She's one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. It's quite amazing. So I think we should be proud. We should teach our children. We should model hard work and we should work hard. I think where the difference lies is this idea of hustle is that I'm always working. I'm always trying to, get to that next rung. And the hustle is that Jack Ma, Gary V, Grant's message, Kevin O'Leary's message of your work, your goal, your profession becomes the center of all things. And when we succumb to the hustle, as I did for a long time, again, we cannot create time. Something has to give. And that something, more often than not, is relationship. And when that starts to break down, then we've really lost those things. I put a post out the other day. At the end of our lives, nobody's going to say, I wish I had worked more. But that's what the hustle message tells us, work more. And then they very subtly align that or make that synonymous with hard work. And the two are not one and the same. As a matter of fact, science will show you once you reach a certain threshold, I think it's 46 hours, you actually reach a point of diminishing returns. And so this idea of I'm up at the hustler hour at 4 a.m. is so ridiculous and it's not sustainable. Something's going to give, and most likely at some point you're going to crater.
Yeah, I appreciate that. To me, you mentioned a few different things. The first one is people are disillusioned on what actually work is. Checking your social pages, that's not work. If you're checking your social pages for 4 hours out of your workday, sorry, bro, that's not work. Okay, work is work. And at the end of the day, we kind of know what it is. Unfortunately, we have this lizard brain that gets that little endorphin when you check your email and, oh, nothing's changed, but you feel like you did something, which you did. You checked your email. Congratulations, right? It doesn't pay very well, by the way. But here's my take on this. It seems to me like hard work implies this mule-like Puritan toughness and enduring lots of suffering, a la David Goggins style, right? Embrace the suck. Where hustling sounds cool. I'm a hustler. like you're outsmarting the competition. You're being better, faster to reach the goal instead of having to just be the mule and have more stamina to keep your head down and kind of suffer through the misery that's required for success. And that's just my take on the word hustle. I think you can twist it however you'd like to. Let's go a little bit deeper though, because with this online exposure to everything, very little is preserved. And there's the word now, which is pornography or porn, which is it's an interesting word, but now there's this hustle porn, which is popular because it adds this sexual undertone to it. And it does attempt to make hustling sound dirty, but a little bit alluring, yet completely addictive and risque. Do you think that there's a misconception possibly between the definition of the words hustle and hard work? Or am I totally off base?
No, I think you're right. I think the adventures of hustle have made it sound sexy. And I believe Alex Ohanian was the first one who coined the term hustle porn, co-founder of Reddit. And he said it best, which all porn is, it's toxic and destructive. And again, there's science to back that up. And this idea of, I'm going to pose in front of my private jet with my bling to show, hey, this is what hustlers do. If that's really what your goal is to own a private jet, by all means, hustle. My goal is I want to foster and cultivate relationship. I want to be my true self every day to everybody I encounter. And I want to play the heck out of my one note, which is helping people. Now, I can do that by working hard. And yeah, there are some days, I own my own business. There are some days I feel like that mule. I remember telling my wife not long ago, I said, I feel like I'm a PowerPoint jockey, right? I'm putting together these strategies for these clients. Everybody has stuff. There's a reason they call it work, because there's some days, even if we own our own stuff, that you just feel that way. And you think, you know what, if I could have a relative just drop a money bomb on me, that would be great. That's not real life. But again, I think there's value, there's nobility in hard work. But the hustle literally says, make your profession, make your career achievements, make your business the center of all things. And I think especially for men, we have the temptation to then tie our identity and worth to what we achieve, which is not healthy, because what happens when those things take a few steps back? And I actually write about that when I was laid off, that Shane just didn't whisper, it roared of how unworthy I was and what a loser I was and all of these things. And in reality, I'm no more worthy now than I was back then, despite what I've accomplished. And so I think we really have to be careful to not get sucked in by the allure of the hustle and how it's been marketed.
Do you think that there's an evolutionary, biological, chemical gene or response that we've developed over the years as humans and I dare to say as men responsible for that part of the business, the family business? Is there something that's programmed in there that frankly you can't see? Many people never see it, Carlos, but you can't see it until you've reached disaster or until you've reached maturity so that you actually can see reality. Do you think that there's something programmed with us?
Yeah, I don't think we have to get to a point of disaster or rock bottom to see it. I know plenty who have made their career choices around the lifestyle that they have and the time that they're going to get and how it basically, they define the life that they want, and then they go design their career around that, and they're very purposeful in doing that. I do think there is a level of maturity to it, but I've also encountered a bunch of young 20 kids who are just starting out saying, I don't want to do what has been modeled for me. I don't want to be the guy always on an airplane, achieving status with all the different hotels. I want to do these things. So they are mature enough to learn from the example, good or bad, that has been set for them, and saying, okay, what is the life I want to lead? Now let me go design my career to enable that lifestyle. And if the lifestyle is the private jet, yeah, you're going to have to work long. You're going to have to find something that brings in that kind of wealth. But again, if that's your goal, what I would encourage you to do is saying, why is a material thing your goal? Because things and people cannot deliver happiness to you. That's a choice we have to make.
Love it. Chapter 3 from the book, The Un-American Dream, is titled Skip to the End. Also in the book, you discuss the idea of, skipping to the end. And I think you might have alluded to that just briefly, but can you kind of give us a deep dive on what skipping to the end actually means?
Yeah, that came from a breakfast with a friend of mine at the time, Mark, who had kind of struck it rich with a chain of restaurants that he had started with his brother in West Texas. And Mark was the most unassuming and one of the kindest souls I ever met. And we had breakfast, and I was so excited to pick the brain of this guy and learn some business truth. And I said to him, Mark, you've made more than enough money to do what you wanted. At the time we met, he was a fourth grade teacher at my children's private school. And I said, if you could do it again, what would you do? And he kind of smiled and very softly said, I'd skip to the end. And I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't embrace it at the time. But what he was telling me was that whole idea of, he's a fourth grade teacher. He had a special way with kids. He was on his kids' schedule. He was able to be home when they were home. He spent more time with his wife. If he had to do it all again, he would have been a fourth grade teacher because it was the life that he always wanted. He didn't care about all the stuff. He cared about what brought him joy, and that was time with his wife and time with his children and really investing and cultivating that lifestyle. And so I also share the story of the Brazilian fisherman. And I'm not going to give that away. You're going to have to go read it. But I think it's, again, that idea of what do we want? What is what we want out of life? Because all of us are only here for a short amount of time. And then how do we achieve that versus I got to have the money, I got to have the stuff, I got to have the houses, the boats, the cars, etc. And even with our kids, they're only in our homes, most of them for 18 years. That's not a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing. It takes a little bit of life experience to be able to say that, because when you're 18 years is a lifetime.
Right.
Once you get close to 40, no matter which side of 40 you're on, you're like 18 years, that's a blink of an eye. It's a couple of deep breaths, actually. I think you've sold a lot of the audience on this concept, and maybe a lot of them are kind of looking for someone to put into words what they've been feeling. So I'm sure there are a few Kleenex boxes that are being utilized right now as people reflect on their own situation. Carlos, can you tell us what steps can these traveling sales guys, even entrepreneurs, what steps can they take to regain some balance in their lives?
I think first and foremost, define and literally write it down. What do you value? And then do that exercise and have that conversation with your closest of relationships. Whether you're a single mom or dad, do it with your older children, your spouse, your partner, whomever that those closest of relationships are. And then say, how do we protect those? How do we literally build a boundary to ensure, because very few of us can say, oh, I'm done. I'm cash. Do that. How do you define your work? How do you define and define your relationship? How do you cultivate that in a way that's going to protect that? And then start to build up boundaries to say, hey, so for instance, for me, it's I will not start work before a certain hour during the day. Now, if I have to move that, Suzanne and I have that conversation. I don't work past a certain time at night. I don't work weekends. And I've been told that's unattainable. That's not realistic. I used to believe the same thing. And so, and then also understand that those boundaries that you're there to protect your values also protect your work. So when I'm working, I have a home office. When I'm working, my family knows, hey, this is his time to work. So I'm not off doing all these, like you said, checking my social pages to see what friend has written or posted. I'm working. And so it allows me to give the best of me during that time. to my clients. And then secondly, communicate. And that is one thing that we tried to weave through the book. I was a horrible communicator on what I was feeling, what I was thinking, the times that I missed out on stuff. I just didn't do it. And so that breeds isolation. And so it turns out that in many respects, Suzanne and I were feeling the same thing. We were both kind of frustrated. We weren't ungrateful, but we were frustrated that I was flying all over the world for a software company when I just wanted to be home. And she was frustrated that, you know, she was in essence a single mom raising 4 small children and dealing with everything around the house, but we didn't communicate that effectively. And I think having that open and honest communication, and it was never that she was not supportive. It was actually a great compliment of, she wanted me home, she wanted me present, she wanted me available. And then that's the third thing, is work on making yourself present. When you are talking to me and I'm responding back and you're here with your phone and you're, yep, checking me. Guess what? All you're telling me is what's on your phone, what's on your social media page, your email is more important. And at some point, I'm just going to say, okay, I guess that's more important. So put the phone away, take your wearable off, and be present and be available and invest and cultivate those relationships.
Yeah, I'm reliving my own experience and dealing with those kind of road marks or light posts or road signs that you've just demonstrated there. My wife called it, she said that her and a lot of the other ladies at the kids' school called themselves the married single moms club, because their husbands, like me, were off, hunting and gathering, if you would, for the family. And it kind of alludes to my next question for you. Wasn't society built like that? Wasn't society built on the man going off to hunt and gather to bring home the spoils, or the wife that was there taking care of the home and raising the kids? Hasn't that been the way it's always been?
Well, I think the difference is when the man came back, he was back. He wasn't stepping out into the home office to just do a few more things after dinner. He wasn't checking his device while his kids were trying to get his attention. He was vested. And I think one of the things I remember, even as a child, when my dad worked, when he came home, there wasn't phone calls that he was on that he had to take. There wasn't more emails he had to return because he couldn't. He wasn't connected. And so the ability now that we carry computers in our hands that we call phones, and I can do as much work from that and look at documents and do these things. We have allowed ourselves to bring our work into our family time. And so if you still abide by those traditional roles that have been established, okay, that's fine. But what are you doing to actually stay within that tradition and not bring yours as that hunter-gatherer to say, my time doing that has now grown exponentially at the expense of my family?
Why'd you write the book? It's a great book. It's out now. People can get it on Amazon. In fact, what I'd like to do is have you sign a couple and offer them to a couple of the guests the
Sure.
audience on the show. Of course, you got to put one to Awesome Mike from my personal library, sir. But why'd you write the book?
Yeah, I wrote the book to help people. I wrote the book to play my one note. And I know the dark night of the soul that I went through to get to where I'm at. I know the pain that I caused my family and my wife, and was so grateful that she agreed to write a very honest and vulnerable chapter herself. And I really wrote it to help people hopefully avoid, or at least look and say, okay, there is a way out. I do have permission to step off this treadmill and live life differently. And that is why I wrote the book. It is not just my story, it's the story of so many others that I have talked to, that I engaged with. And that's why I put the 5 profiles in the back of individuals who are kind enough and brave enough to share their stories. But it was there to help people. And that's really what we're hoping we get out of it, is those stories of, this book helped me reassess and chart a different course.
the book is one thing, but you've actually created a website about the book that kind of nurtures the book, tells the backstory. I'm so grateful for you and for your wife for doing that, because it allows a lot more perspective on the actual content of the book. So I encourage everyone to definitely check it out. Let's talk about going forward now. So you had this company, VisumCx or VisumCx. There I go, butchering it again. I have to say, I was looking at it. I'm like, oh, maybe this would be a good investment. We're in the investment field. But then I looked and I said, whoa, wait a minute. The CFO and the COO, she's just the front end administrator at a school. Can you talk about working with your wife? And I jest, of course. The CFO and COO is your wife, Suzanne.
Well, I think, and I've told this to my wife, working moms who do it well, and there's legion of them, are the best executives you can find. If you can go to work every day and work your job and do it well, and then come home and manage a household, I want you on my executive team. And we're not hiring, so no resumes, please. But you think about that. You're working 2 full-time jobs, logistics, finance, emergency planning. It's amazing. So I would hire any working mom to go, and if I was growing a company, because I applaud them and I'm in awe. And when we started VisumCx, Suzanne was still at the school, and she has always ran circles around me when it came to finance and accounting. And so as we started to talk, she was already a partner, but she wasn't working side by side. I'm horrible at the financial side and the accounting side and the invoicing side. And so 2 years ago, she said, you know what? I think, yeah, it's time to leave the school. Let's do this together. And so she handles all of our administrative, all of our invoicing, all of our accounting, all of our legal, deals with the CPAs, the attorney. And 5 days in, she came in and said, I love you. I'm glad we're doing this together. You touch the accounting system again, I'm going to break your fingers. And it has been a great partnership. And I do lean on her for advice, for insight, because she has a perspective that I don't have. I can't do it all. I'm a human being. And so 2 years in, it's been fantastic, and I wouldn't change a thing.
We might have to rename you Carlos Lucky Dog Hidalgo, because to have a spouse that will tolerate us in that regard is truly good fortune and even a blessing. Before we go on to my signature questions and kind of bring this one home, Carlos, I want to talk about your philanthropic venture. Now, you and your wife, you have a charity that supports single moms and widows from Uganda. Can you kind of explain that a little bit, and maybe even provide a way that the listeners could even support you in that regard?
Yeah, so to be clear, it's not our charity. It is one we are support and we are passionate about, and credit where credit is due. I actually have followed Suzanne's lead in that. Suzanne is very much more involved than I am. I believe in it. If you go to the VisumCx website, there's actually a page on it that we call Why We Do What We Do. And this is an organization called Beauty for Ashes Uganda. It's just beautyforashesuganda.org. And it is dedicated, and sole focus is to the long-term sustainability, empowerment, and education of single moms and widows in the Ateso region of Uganda. And they sponsor 1,000 moms. There's over 6,000 kids that are in the program. And so Suzanne does a lot of different things as a volunteer for the organization. She goes over 2 to 3 times a year. I have been more background. I love what it does. I wish I could go over more. I'll actually be going back with her in January this year in 2020. So I'm super excited about that. I went 2 years ago, and just an unbelievable organization. And it has been one of my joys to see Suzanne just throw herself into it. So she has been able to form relationships, see moms' lives change, so on and so forth. So that's part of what we do, why we do with VisumCx, is so we can give part of our profits to that organization.
Yeah, that's really cool. Where do you see VisumCx going in the next 5 or 10 years as a corporate entity in the work that you're doing?
You know, I see it as skipping to the end. What do we, as we have one left at home who graduates in May of 2020, what do we want this organization to be? And our real goal is, and I get the question all the time, what kind of clients do you work with? We work with people who want to change, organizations that want to drive effectual change, that have a shared value system, and quite frankly, people we like. Because at the end of the day, that's our litmus. So it doesn't matter if you're, 20 billion in revenue or 2 million in revenue. If you meet those 3 criteria, we want to work with you. So we're not looking to build this massive agency. I don't care about Inc. 5000 awards. I'm proud of them. And if they come our way, great. But I'm not seeking to grow this, the next big agency. I am seeking to do really good work with a select group of clients that we can take a lot of joy and pride in. So if that lasts 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'll be fortunate enough, if I'm still standing at that point, to say we've had a good run and it has supported the life that Suzanne and I want.
That is truly worthy of an endeavor to pursue. What I'd like to do now is kind of shift gears, Carlos. I have a couple of signature questions that I ask all the guests. No right answers, no wrong answers. I guess they're all right answers, I should say. Just want to get your insight. So first one, Carlos, if you picked up the phone or you clicked on your AirPods or whatever it is, and on the other end of the phone was the 23-year-old Carlos, and you had a couple minutes, what advice would you give to your younger, early 20-year-old self?
First one is communicate with your wife about everything. If you're feeling down, tell her you're feeling down. If you're feeling unworthy, tell her you're feeling unworthy. If you're feeling anxious, tell her you're feeling anxious. You don't have to, quote unquote, as an individual, every day pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get over it. Your feelings are real. At that time, it's how you're feeling. And so that's number one. Number two would be really sit down with your wife or your significant relationship and determine what is that life, both short-term and long-term, that I want. And then design and be purposeful to build a career or your profession around that. And if you just want to do a 9 to 5, find that 9 to 5 job so you can have coffee and breakfast with your family, drop your kids at school, go to work, come home, and leave it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's admirable. It sure as heck beats hating life and being miserable and hating your job. If it's, like you said, Grant, I'm drawing a blank on his wife's name at this point, the two of you are saying this is what we want and our kids are behind it, go for it. But just do it in community with your closest of relationships. And that's what I would tell myself.
Words of wisdom. The challenge is, would 23-year-old Carlos Hidalgo hear that or be able to hear that? Hopefully you would. In fact, I'm sure that your kids are benefiting from those words currently. Second question. This is a little more fun, Carlos. If you could have any superpower, which one would you choose and what would you do with it?
I would want to reverse time, but not lose the lessons that I've learned. And if I was going to do it for just pure gain, think about going to a casino, writing down the 10 numbers that just hit on roulette and reversing time, and you're betting the house on those numbers. Then we could all retire. But no, I think I would reverse time and just be able to go back and do some things a little bit differently that I could do better. But, we can't. And so I think I bristle when I hear the term no regrets, because that tells me, like, really? I'm not talking about guilt. talking about regret, and I have regret. I have regret on how I built businesses and how I advanced my career at times, but that regret is the best teacher. And so I don't resent it. And I think if I could reverse time, I probably would not have that as that teacher, but that would be my superpower, followed up very closely by invisibility.
Ah, now the plot thickens there. So I noticed something though, and I kind of want to take a risk here with you. You got a couple of patches of ink on your arm there that I believe I saw. Can you tell us about that a little bit? And I really think you're going to shock some people, because I think that most folks think of you as this buttoned up and kind of poster board for corporate America that maybe has limped away to do this work with my wife thing. But you're a gangster. What's the deal with the ink, and what is it? What do you got going on there?
Well, I've got more than a few. They're rather addictive, and I've got a few more on tap that will be added. But this one is the Greek word where we get our word power, and it's not because I think I've got great biceps. It's just a reminder to live a powerful life. And it's the word dunamis, which is found in Acts 1:8. And I think, and sometimes I forget I even have them. So when you said that, I was like, oh, what is he talking about? To live that powerful life. This other one here is a tree with my children's initials in it. And I've got some things to do. And then this one stands for hope, faith, and love. And Suzanne, at one point a few years back, said, hey, I think I want to get that on my wrist. And she showed it to me, and I said, that's really cool. Would you be okay if I did the same, but I want to put it on my forearm? And I would say, honestly, for me, faith, hope, and love defines what I've experienced through my relationship with her.
You have justified your endeavor. And, there is something about that. I don't have any tattoos, but if anybody should have a tattoo, I believe it should be me. Joined the Army at 17, karate guy, tough guy, shaved head, goatee. I don't know what it is. I've actually even designed what I would get. But as you mentioned, it's very addictive, and I don't want a face tattoo. And I could see Mike Tyson talking me into one if that happened. But anyways, Carlos, thanks a lot for being on the show today. And I want to thank you personally for the inspiration that you've even given to me, and kind of that little bit of a lifeline that, my heart is telling me the truth, and I'm not just being weak by feeling that way, and kind of helping to get some clarity through your work. Not only on the corporate side, you've got some very good content that a lot of our listeners can use to be better in their jobs, and also the content now with the UnAmerican Dream that they can be better all around. So I appreciate that personally. And I can actually tell you on behalf of all the people that you've impacted and will impact, I can say a hearty thank you on their behalf as well. Thanks for being on the show today. And we do wish you many more years of fortune and success, both as Dr. Jekyll and also to keep Mr. Hyde at bay, because you mentioned before, it's a work in progress. It's not a goal line. As we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, Carlos, it's about the journey, and I wish you well on yours. Look forward to seeing you again and maybe meeting you sometime in the near future. And a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. And you can even join the notification squad by clicking on that little bell, so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new issue. Now, our goal this summer is to get 1,000 new subscribers. So we're going to need your help in doing that. Appreciate your help. If you like the episode or like the show, please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues that might also appreciate it. Thanks again for being on the show, Carlos. Thanks for everyone supporting the show. And most of all, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.